Hi, I'm Brian Zahnd. I'm pastor of Word of Life Church in St. Joseph, Missouri, and the author of a dozen or so books, including A Farewell to Mars, where I tell my story of moving away from a Christianity comfortable with being a chaplain to the empire that wages war, to eventually arriving to a place where I understood that the waging of war is incompatible with following Jesus Christ. And that's why, the Nonviolent Gospel Network is important, why it matters, why we need these voices that were the ubiquitous, universal voice of the church for the first 3 centuries. But then after Constantine, we had the catastrophe, and those voices have been pushed to the margins. I'm recording this on August 6th, the 81st anniversary of the atomic bombing of Hiroshima. It's also, by ironic or tragic coincidence, the feast day of the Transfiguration. So you have, a face shining like the sun, and a little boy at the bottom of the mountain is finally healed from a demon that had thrown him into fire and water. But then on August 6, 1945, you have this diabolical, monstrous weapon unleashed that was as bright as the sun, and a demon was unleashed that threw countless boys and girls into the fires of an atomic explosion and the waters of radioactive rain. I read John Hersey's account, Hiroshima, when I was 13 years old. And at that time, I just knew that this was an unspeakable evil. I knew that Auschwitz and Hiroshima needed to be spoken of in the same breath. The ashes from the ovens of Auschwitz and the mushroom cloud over Hiroshima, they come from the same impulse to wage war on an industrial scale and be able to kill countless people. At 13, I knew that was evil, but by the time I was 30, I had been taught. By this time, I was a pastor, a spiritual leader, a teacher. I knew the Bible, as far as the text, far better at 30 than I did at 13, but somehow I had experienced a moral regression because I had been taught how to ignore the clear teachings of the Sermon on the Mount. Well, in my early 40s, I was born again, and returned to really what my teenage conscience had known all along. And so that's why these things matter. I don't describe myself, by the way, as a pacifist. Pacifism is a ethical position regarding violence that one can adopt independent of Jesus Christ. This may be admirable, but it doesn't describe me. What I am is a Christian. And so let's have the conversation about how Christ informs us on the subject of violence. I'm convinced that if we will come to the scriptures, if we'll come to the gospels, if we'll come to the Jesus that we find in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, it doesn't take that much effort to realize that Jesus calls his church to the way of peace and nonviolence. So blessings on the Nonviolent Gospel Network. Amen.